Hello everyone, I'm Rinrir, or you can just call me Rin, and today I was making a video and I realized it was going to be a bigger project than I thought it was going to be. So, to start this off with, each one of these videos is going to be placed into a playlist in the order that I think is the most relevant to all players. So, go check my channel if you're watching this, and go see if there's a playlist that has all these videos in a certain order. Now this first video is going to be focusing on talents, and the reason I want to focus on talents is there's some of them that are confusing, and there's some of them that I kind of wish I'd known about before I started playing the games, so when I ran into them in game I wasn't as confused. So starting off, I'm going to suggest that every player, if you haven't done so already, level up each gauntlet to level 6. There are 2 talents locked behind a level wall on each class, one at level 3 and one at level 6. So if you get to level 6 on all of them, you'll have all the talents available to you and you'll be able to practice with them and get more used to them. Experience will be a better teacher than I ever could be. I'm just going to explain to you what works for me and what I do know about them, and give you a few pointers and explain the downsides to some of them, and also explain a few things that might frustrate you or you might find really confusing about them. So starting off, we're going to discuss Vitalstone. Now the reason I'm discussing Vitalstone, it's the first one that really shocked me when I ran into it, because it's really the most obvious one. And when you knock someone or you disrupt them and their health hits 0, they'll resurrect with 10 health and they'll be immune for 4 damage for 4 seconds after resurrection. So what that means is they're going to be able to reposition. They're not going to be able to shoot you and you're not going to be able to hurt them, at least until they stop glowing yellow. And they're going to have just a little bit of health. They're going to be essentially one shot, so if they don't finish you off right away, you're probably going to win the fight. Now that being said, there are chances that they're going to win the fight. There's also the chance in team-based modes that their teammate is going to be there before you're able to finish them, and they might even polish you off before you manage to get your exile. So keep that in mind, and when someone goes yellow, you might want to just switch targets for a second and then return to them once they've stopped being invulnerable. The downside to running Vitalstone is if you go down on drop. Once you go down, especially if you go down in early game, it can be a really big downfall, because you're basically losing a talent slot for that entire game. The resurrection only works once. No matter what you do, you're not going to get it back for the rest of the game. So if you're losing the fight early game and you're wasting your Vitalstone, you might want to consider choosing a different talent, because recovery, reckless might have helped you out a little bit better. It could have given you the extra damage you needed to finish the fight without being exiled in the first place and having to resurrect. Or you could heal enough damage that you've taken to not go out before you finish the fight. So just consider that if you're somebody that likes to use Vitalstone and you find yourself going down early game. If you find yourself going down late game, it might be a better talent for you, because I know in a 1v1 situation, having somebody resurrect can be really confusing and you might not be prepared for it, especially if you think that you've already won. So keep that in mind. Vitalstone can be useful, but I would really recommend using your talent points on a different talent, especially if you're going down in the early game. Now, Fortitude is another one that's going to be causing a lot of confusion, especially to new players and people who haven't experienced it before or haven't ever looked at it. So what Fortitude does, it absorbs 1 source of damage every 60 seconds as a base talent. I'm not going to give you all the numbers because it's a lot of numbers to keep track of, and I don't really pay much attention to it, but I do know that the cooldown time decreases, and this is the reason why some of your shots do no damage. There is also Tundra, which is a Frostborn level skill, and it also will give you the immune word above them when you hit them if they're using it, and it also blocks damage and certain spells. So just keep that in mind, because it could be a combination of the two or one of the two. Now we're gonna move on to Vigor, and Vigor gives you extra health. And the reason this can be confusing is you'll find yourself doing more damage to players than they do to you, and they might, exile you, and you'll be like, but I did 200 and some odd damage to them, why aren't they down? Vigor's probably the reason why they're down. Also, it could be a number of combinations of talents. There's a lot of things that can go on in these talents, so I'm going to try to give you the best idea I can. Now, Vigor, if I'm not mistaken, can give you up to 40 extra health. It might be 35. I know with Stone, it'll increase your health 20%. So running Vigor and Stone might be a really good build. Now, moving on to the ones you start with, or at least in the mine section. Focus Mana. As long as you have more than 80% or 80% mana, your spell damage is going to be increased by 15%. Now, that really equates to the first shot or two, especially when you first drop in. And as you get better amulets, the usefulness of this will go up. And as you level it up, it'll also increase in the damage that it does. So keep that in mind. It's a really strong talent in certain situations, but it really depends on the loot that you have, on whether or not you're really going to get the full potential out of it. Now, Spellslinger allows you to carry extra gauntlets and ruins in your inventory. They do take up potion slots, so be aware of that. You might want to just carry 2 extra items, and then carry 2 healing items, just so that you have some on you in case you need it. It also lowers your cooldown speed, so you'll be able to cast another sorcery sooner than players who aren't running Spellslinger, which could be a huge boon. As you level up, the cooldown decreases. So you'll have less time to wait as it gets higher leveled and you collect more scrolls. Now, moving on to Runic Fluency. Runic Fluency can be a fun one. It gives you an extra ruin charge, and it decreases your ruin cooldown by 5%. So you'll be able to use your ruins a little bit faster than other players, similar to the way sorceries are with Spellslinger. And the cooldown for the ruins increases as you collect more scrolls for the mine talent. Keep in mind that the max ruin charge stays the same, but if you combine this with lightning, you can have up to 3 ruin charges if you make it to 3rd circle and you get overload. So it could be a really good one to run with lightning. I typically run it with lightning, but I don't use lightning that often, so you probably won't see me using it. Now, tracking. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. Whenever you hit somebody with a spell, it's going to outline a target for you and your teammate. This is through walls and through buildings and other obstacles. So if you find yourself trying to hunt down people that you just hit, this will help you out. It also works on people who are using Invis or Dash. So you'll be able to see their red outline even if they use Invisibility or the Shadow Step Ruin. So it could be really useful, especially if you find yourself losing people that turn invisible. Now, Harmony is my personal favorite mine talent, and it's mostly because I don't like being slowed, frozen, or shocked. Now, when you're slow, it takes longer for you to cast spells, it takes longer for you to jump, and it takes longer for you to move. Which is pretty obvious, but I thought I'd explain it anyways. Now when you're frozen, you're going to be unable to move. Frozen also typically comes with a slow effect right before you get frozen. It tries to give you a bit of a buffer before you get frozen, but really it's not a lot of time. Unless you have a dash rune and you dash backwards out of it, you're not really going to be able to avoid being frozen that often. Just keep in mind that Harmony will prevent you from being frozen, and it can be really helpful because while you're frozen, you're a sitting duck. Now, when you're shocked, you're unable to fire back any spells or sorceries, but I do believe you're still able to use your ruin, and you're definitely still able to move around and walk. So your best bet to being able to survive that fight, if you do find yourself being shocked and you're not running Harmony, is to simply just get away from whatever's causing you to be shocked. Now, moving on to the body talents. Dexterity sounds kind of weird and kind of lame. It increases your jump height by 25%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually just enough to get you out of a stone shockwave blast radius. So you might be able to jump over somebody who's casting a shockwave at you, or jump over their attack and not take any damage. It also decreases the amount of mana it takes to levitate, so you'll be able to reposition yourself using less mana, so you might still have enough mana to send a few shots back at an opponent after you reposition yourself. Now, Finders Keepers, you get a chance to find potions from chests at a rate of 25% of the base speed, or base stat, and then you get a chance to find scrolls from chests at a rate of 50%. Now, this also stacks. Now, this could be useful in team-based game modes, or if you find yourself late game finding a lot of chests and you need potions. But typically, by the time you fill out all of your slots, even with Finders Keepers, there's not really going to be a lot of chests left to open, so you're not really going to be finding that many potions. And once you have all your talents full up, Finders Keepers is kind of just sitting there unless you're taking advantage of the potions thing. So it could be useful in team-based game modes. I would recommend not using it in solos, simply because there's other talents that could take up that slot that could be more useful even if you don't even have a scroll in that talent slot. Now, moving on to scavenging. Scavenging is one that I really feel as though every player should have on drop. It shouldn't be a talent. I think it should just be a base feature of the game, because third partying in this game is a pretty frequent occurrence, and a lot of people tend to wait for third parties versus trying to find their own fights. Now, that's cool and all, but this will give you that extra bit of health if you can manage to finish your fight if you find yourself getting third partied, and give you a little bit more health to deal with the threat at hand. It's also a really huge talent to run in Clash. You'll have health that normally you wouldn't have otherwise, because I think you only get like 2 shields in Clash, and at least this way you'll be healing every time you get an elimination, so you'll be able to survive a little bit longer and get a few more elims and, you know, keep the ball rolling a little bit easier. Now, Fever increases the amount of spells you can cast in a given amount of time. So essentially you get to cast your magic a little bit faster. It still uses the same amount of mana, but for example, you'll be able to shoot 3 fireballs in the time it takes somebody who's not running Fever to shoot 2. So this, like, you could actually take somebody out or do enough damage to really hurt them before they even have a chance to really react. So just keep that in mind. And it does, like, all these talents do get better as you collect scrolls for them, so also keep that in mind. I'm not going to run through all the numbers simply because it's a lot of numbers. Now, Foresight's one I haven't actually used yet, and it's mostly just because I don't see myself spending 3 points just to see future storms and mana vaults. The seeing enemies on the minimap every 10 seconds could be pretty useful, but generally when people are close enough to be on your minimap, they're close enough for you to see, hear, or at least figure out that they're nearby. And seeing future zones isn't really going to help you, because the zones aren't really that harsh in this game, at least not in early game. And you can normally get yourself out of zone fairly easily, even if zone pools clear to the other side of map. Just head to zone. You really want to head to zone though in this game. You get certain skill levels as you reach zone, which I'll explain in the next episode. But continuing on. Another thing that kind of deters me from using it is being already at a mana vault. Like, let's say one just appears and you open it. It's gonna cause attention to you. Like, players are gonna head to mana vaults just naturally anyways. Mana vaults appear on your map so you're able to look at them no matter where you are on the map. So players will relocate to go try to obtain a mana vault, and if they see one get popped, they're still probably going to head to that mana vault to try to, you know, see if they can get you before you get the loot, or maybe even just try to get you to exile you and get your loot. So keep that in mind when using Foresight. Keep a vigilant eye out for enemies coming in to try to take your loot. Moving on to the spirit talents. Now Escapist is the one you start with. Now they buffs Escapist with launch, and they gave it a base plus run speed of 3, which is about the same as having blue boots. Now the interesting thing about this thing is when you equipped it with blue boots, like if you're running Escapist and you equip blue boots, you'll have plus 6 run speed. The run speed does stack on top of boots. So if you get a gold boots, you'll really be cruising. And I think that the max speed that you can get is 9. But I could be mistaken, so don't quote me on that. Like I said, there's a lot of numbers in this game, so I'm not going to get everything correct when it comes to the numbers. So I'm just giving you the base stats that you see here. Just keep in mind that they do get better as you collect more scrolls for them. And now that I think you've heard that 3 times, you'll remember it. So I apologize for saying it so many times. Also, when you take damage using Escapist, it's going to increase your run speed. Now, the run speed actually increases as you level this talent up. The base run speed will not. So when you get hurt, you'll go zoomy zoom. And when you're not hurt, you're going to be just stuck at your normal speed. Now, Reckless is one of my personal favorites, simply because I normally find myself losing my shield at the very least. So having that extra damage behind my shots and the lowered mana cost, being able to cast a few more spells maybe, or levitate a little bit more, can be really huge in a fight. And it can also save your life. It's one I would recommend over using Vitalstone, simply because usually on drop, you're not going to have armor anyways, so you're going to be able to do a little bit more damage, and you might be able to win that fight that you wouldn't have otherwise. Now, recovery is a little weird, and the way it works is whenever you take damage, you'll regenerate 35% of that damage over 12 seconds. Well, like I said, numbers aren't my strong suit, but just know that you'll regenerate a good portion of the damage that you take over 12 seconds, and it does work while you're in a fight. So it could be the difference between 1 HP or a few more HP than your opponent has, and it might help you out. Now, moving on to Thirsty. Now, you'll be able to consume potions and shield shards at a rate of 35% faster. I'm pretty sure that increases as you level it up. And I'm not sure if the teammate part increases as well. But whenever you drink a potion and you're healing, your health will spread to your teammates. Provided they're within a couple of feet of you. It's really short distance, but as long as y'all are all grouped together, y'all should all get the heals. It's not like it's going to take away your health. It's going to give your teammates a portion of the health that you're regenerating. So for example, if you're regenerating at 4, all of your teammates are going to regen at 2. Or roughly 2 or 3. So to wrap up the video, I'm just going to recommend the build that I typically use. It seems to do me the best overall. And I've tried most of the talents out in almost every arrangement that I could possibly even go to. So I use Harmony because I hate being slowed, frozen, or shocked. As I said earlier, the incoming damage reduction is really nice, especially when it increases. Like I said before, it could be the difference between 1 HP and no HP. Now, Scavenging or Fortitude, I like running Fortitude if I feel like I've been getting sniped with ice excessively, or I just want to be immune to one shot, so if someone's sneaking up on me, I don't get taken by surprise and lose a bunch of health. They at least have to hit me twice before I actually start taking damage, and it is really nice. And I run Scavenging, like I said, when I get third-partied a lot more often, so that way at least I'm ready for the next fight. in those instances where I feel like I need to run it. Now, Reckless, I typically run it just because I find myself losing my shields more often than not. And having that extra oomph to finish out that fight so I don't get exiled is always a huge help. It also gives me a few more spells or maybe a little bit more levitation room. So there's a lot of things to consider. Now, do keep in mind that the build that they had to nerf did consist of, it was either Harmony, Scavenging, and Recovery, or it was Harmony, Fortitude, and Recovery. And it was insanely powerful. If you weren't running it, you were probably not doing very well in beta. So just be grateful that they changed a few things, because there would be a lot more sweaty fights and things would be a lot more confusing if they hadn't. So I hope that helps some of you understand the talents a little bit better. And I'm going to be covering the skill levels in the next video. And then I'll get more into the in-game stuff and more tips and tricks things on how to do things. I just wanted to cover the bases first, especially for new players. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing. I'll be posting more content as often as possible and at as high a quality as possible. Do forgive me, like I said a minute ago, I am on a laptop, so especially when I'm streaming, quality might not be so good. So just keep that in mind and be patient with me. I'll get better as it goes. Y'all have a great day, and I hope y'all have a Merry Christmas, or y'all had a Merry Christmas, depending on when this video gets out. And I'll see y'all next time.